Okay, today we're going to look at section 1.4 titled Quadratic Equations. I'll start out by defining a quadratic equation as an equation containing a second degree polynomial of the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where a, b, and c are real numbers and a does not equal 0. We say an equation of this type is a quadratic equation in a standard form. So we're going to learn 4 ways to solve quadratic equations. We're going to learn the factor and using the zero factor property. We're going to learn the square root property. We're going to learn completing the square, and then we'll learn the quadratic formula. So let's start with the zero factor property and how this leads to factoring. If a times b equals 0, then a equals 0 or b equals 0 or both. So we want to factor these things to two different equations and or two different factors and then set them both equal to 0. So how does this work? Well, we start out with simple quadratic equation, x squared minus 9x plus 18. We're looking at factoring. So the trick to this is to take whatever we have here, the understood 1 in this case, multiply it by here. So a times c is 18. Now we need to look at a couple things. It's positive, right? So that means my factors have to either be both positive or both negative. My b is negative, so my factors are going to be both negative. Now what I do is I take this 18 and I think about the factors of 18. And what I'm looking for is two factors when added together give me 9. And that is -3 times -6 in this case. So that means this breaks down to x minus 3 times x minus 6 equals 0. And if you FOIL this, you should get a quadratic equation back. So by the zero factor property, either x minus 3 equals 0 or x minus 6 equals 0. So either x equals 3 or x equals 6. Now, the best part about this is you can check your answers. So we can go through and check 3. We have 3 squared minus 9 times 3 plus 18 equals 0. Well, 3 squared is 9. 9 times 3, -27 plus 18 equals 0, and that does. So 3 is an answer. And also check 6. 6 squared minus 9 times 6 plus 18, does that equal 0? Well, this is 36 minus 54 plus 18, and that equals 0. So both of my answers are valid. Same process here. 1 times -12, so I have a -12. That means one's going to be negative and one's going to be positive. This is positive, so the larger of the two are positive. So the difference between two of my factors will be 4. So breaking down 12, I have 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and there I go. 6 being larger will be positive. So I have x plus 6 times x minus 2 equals 0. Again, if you want to check it and FOIL it to be sure, you're more than welcome to do so. So we have x plus 6 equals 0, or x minus 2 equals 0. So x equals -6, or x equals 2. And again, particularly on an exam, check your work. If you have time, check it. Okay, this next one. We have -49. It's pretty obvious here. One's positive and one's negative. And since there's no middle term, they have to be the same. So we're going to have x minus 7, x plus 7. X minus 7 equals 0, or x plus 7 equals 0. X equals 7, or x equals -7. And again, do not be afraid to plug them in here real quick. 7 squared is 49, 49 minus 49. -7 squared is 49 as well. So they both work. Okay, now you may have to put it in a proper form. So subtract 15 from both sides. 2x squared minus x minus 15 equals 0. Okay, so now we have -30. Here's the problem. Well, we're going to have 2x and we're going to have x. And my factors are going to be 6 and 5. But here's the problem. And 6 is going to be negative. Since I don't have a 1 here, there's my -6. All right, so I have -6, 5 gives me -1. So 2x plus 5 equals 0, or x minus 3 equals 0. 2x equals -5, x equals -5 halves, or x equals 3. That gets a little more complex when we have a number other than 1. We'll look at that in another set of problems as well. So let's rewrite our problem here. 4x squared plus 15x plus 9 equals 0. So I have 36, and I want it to add up to be 15. What is that? 3 and 12? And they're both going to be positive. So looking at this, three times 3, and they're both going to be positive. So if I have x times 3 here, and I have 4x, 12 and 3, 15. I'm there. Then I have 4x plus 3 equals 0, or x plus 3 equals 0. 4x equals -3, x equals -3/4, or x equals -3. Trust me, there's easier methods. These are easy when the a term is 1. They get a little more complex when it's not, which brings us to the other one, which is set up where the a has to be 1. Oh, sorry, square root first. Square root property says if x squared equals k, then x equals plus or minus the square root of k. Solve the following equations using the square root. Well, if x squared equals 25, x equals plus or minus the square root of 25, which means x equals plus or minus 5. If x squared equals negative 81, then x equals plus or minus the square root of negative 81, which is plus or minus the square root of negative 1 times 81, which is plus or minus the square root of negative 1 times square root of 81, which is plus or minus 9i. Okay, so now I have x plus 6 squared and equals 64. So now if I take the square root of both sides, I get x plus 6 equals plus or minus 8. Subtract 6 from both sides, and I get x equals plus or minus 8 minus 6, which is 8 minus 6, or 2, or negative 8 minus 6, which is 14. And again, you can plug these in and see if they work. So, the third method we're learning is called completing the square. Steps for solving ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 by completing the square. Subtract c from both sides. Compute b divided by 2 squared and add to both sides. Factor the left side. Solve using the square root property. So there is a caveat to this. Excuse me. A has to be 1 for this method to work. So first step, subtract c from both sides. I get x squared plus 8x equals negative 12. Okay, so then it says compute b divided by 2 squared. Well, b is 8 divided by 2 squared, which is 16. Add it to both sides. Now, what this does for us, in case you don't see it, is this sets this up as x plus 1/2 b, or b over 2, squared. And that equals 4. So x plus 4 equals plus or minus 2. So x equals plus 2 minus 4, or negative 2. X equals minus 2 minus 4, which is negative 6. Okay, same process here. Again, we have 1 for our a, so we don't have to worry about it. We can complete the square. I have x squared minus 6x equals 10. Now, I prefer to break this down. 1/2 b equals negative 3. 1/2 b squared equals 9. So we're adding 9 to both sides. That makes this x plus 1/2 b, which is minus 3, squared equals 19. X minus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 19. Add 3, x equals 3, plus or minus the square root of 19. And for my purposes, that is fine for the solution. The last method we learned is probably one you've heard of, may even have used in previous courses, called quadratic formula. This is the simplest way. It works for anything. All you have to do is put it in the form ax squared plus bx minus c equals 0, and then just plug in the numbers and it comes out to the proper answer for x. So we have x squared plus 3x minus 7 equals 0. So x is equal to negative b. B is 3, so negative 3, plus or minus the square root of b squared, 3 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 7. all over 2 times a, which is 1. So we have -3 plus or minus the square root of 9. This becomes -4 times 1, which is -4 times -7 plus 28 all over 2, which is -3 plus or minus the square root of 37 over 2. So this is when you don't have a nice pretty one to factor. All right, and one more here. Again, we want to get this into proper form, so let's add 40 to both sides. And now we just plug it into our formula. X equals -b. b is -12 plus or minus the square root of b squared, -12 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 40, all over 2 times a, which is 1. So I'm looking at 12 plus or minus square root of -12 squared is 144. -4 times 1 is -4 times 40 is -160. 2 times 1 is 2. So we have 12 plus or minus the square root of -16 over 2. 12 plus or minus 4i over 2, or 6 plus or minus 2i. Okay, so that's 4 ways to solve quadratic equations. Again, as always, if you have any questions, email me. If you need to talk about it or see it work, we can set up Zoom. Don't be afraid to ask. That's the main thing. I know this class is quick. 8 weeks is a short time for all of this. There's a lot to cover. But if you have questions, especially early on like this, you definitely want to get them answered, or else you'll get totally lost. We don't want that to happen. So definitely, if you have a question, if you're in doubt about something, don't hesitate. Email me, let me know. If you think you might be better served by Zoom meeting, we can set one up if you can't make the regular Zoom meeting. But definitely, if you need the help, seek it, please. So that's all for this section. Have a great day.